Born from the bright lights of Hollywood, yet swallowed by its darkest shadows, Corey Haim rose as a teenage star adored worldwide, while secretly battling fears no camera ever captured. Behind the fame lurked predators, addiction, and betrayals that pushed him toward a tragic end. His story isn't just a fall from grace, it's a haunting mystery Hollywood still tries to hide. Childhood and the first spark of stardom. Before Hollywood claimed him, Corey Haim was just a painfully shy boy from Toronto, soft-spoken, wide-eyed, and hiding behind the safety of his mother's shoulder. He wasn't the kind of kid who chased the spotlight. In fact, he seemed almost allergic to it. His mother, watching her son fold into himself, believed that the only way to pull him out was to push him forward, so she signed him up for improv classes, mime lessons, anything that might draw him out of his shell. It was a gamble, one that would change everything. Ironically, it wasn't Corey who dreamed of being an actor. It was his older sister, Carrie. But life has a way of bending fate in strange, almost cinematic ways. At every audition she dragged Corey to, directors found themselves distracted by the quiet kid waiting in the corner. He wasn't trying to impress anyone, yet everyone saw something in him. There was a spark, raw, unpolished, but unmistakable. Soon, commercials came calling. Then a role on the Edison twins pulled him from Canada's chilly suburbs and placed him firmly on the industry's radar. The boy who never asked for attention suddenly found himself surrounded by it. Hollywood was beginning to whisper his name. But the rise wasn't smooth. Corey's parents divorced in 1982, leaving him emotionally bruised at an age when most kids are still learning who they are. He carried that hurt with him, even as his career began to take flight. The contrast was jarring, a child adored by strangers yet quietly unraveling at home. Still, the spotlight grew brighter. Hollywood beckoned louder. And Corey, whether ready or not, was already stepping onto a path that promised fame, danger, and a destiny far more treacherous than anyone around him could imagine. Firstborn, the role that shattered innocence. Hollywood should have been a wonderland for a 13-year-old kid landing his first major movie role. For Corey Haim, Firstborn was supposed to be just that, a milestone, a dream cracked open early. Instead, it became the place where childhood ended far too soon. When Corey stepped onto that set in 1984, he was still delicate, still unsure of himself, a boy trying to navigate a world built for adults with sharp edges. And one of those edges cut him deeper than anyone knew. His co-star, Peter Weller, playing a violent, menacing boyfriend in the film, decided to lean into method acting. What Corey thought would be a friendly compliment turned into a moment that would haunt him. Weller grabbed the boy, slammed him against a wall, and told him never to speak to him again. No script, no rehearsal, just raw intimidation delivered to a child who barely understood what was happening. For Corey, the line between acting and reality blurred in the most terrifying way. The set that should have felt magical instead became a maze of fear. He was too young to interpret Weller's behavior as a performance technique. All he felt was danger, immediate, visceral, unforgettable. And the emotional weight didn't end there. At a cast party, Corey watched his divorced parents dance, but not with each other. The sight pierced him. The two people he wanted most in the same room were now part of two different worlds, each holding someone new. That night, the rising young actor broke down in tears, overwhelmed by a loneliness no amount of fame could soften. Yet the cameras kept rolling. Hollywood kept applauding. And Corey, still just a kid, learned his first brutal lesson. The industry doesn't pause for broken hearts or shaken spirits. But something had shifted inside him. Behind the adorable smile and effortless charm the world would soon adore was a boy already carrying the weight of fear, confusion, and emotional bruises he didn't yet know how to name. Firstborn had given him exposure, opportunity, and a lingering shadow that would follow him into every role, every friendship, and every dark chapter still waiting ahead. Soon, bigger movies, brighter lights, and unimaginable pressure would come calling. And Corey, still wounded but hopeful, walked forward unaware that Firstborn was only the first crack in a childhood that was rapidly slipping away. If you like our video, please comment 1, and want to continue the video, press 3. Rising fame, silver bullet, awards, and a dangerous spotlight. As Corey Haim pushed forward after the emotional storm of Firstborn, Hollywood seemed eager to embrace him, and for a brief, glittering moment, it looked like the world might finally be giving the fragile young actor a place where he truly belonged. His first major breakthrough came with Silver Bullet in 1985. Suddenly, Corey wasn't just another promising face, he was a full-fledged star. Audiences connected to something genuine in him, something vulnerable yet courageous, a spark that made him impossible to ignore. It was the kind of performance that made casting directors lean forward, whispering, "This kid is special." Then came A Time to Live. Acting alongside the legendary Liza Minnelli, Corey delivered a performance so raw and moving that it earned him a Young Artist Award. Fame was no longer creeping toward him, it was sprinting. But with every cheer, every headline, every camera flash, something inside Corey tightened. He was still the shy kid from Toronto, still the boy struggling to understand his place in a world that demanded confidence he didn't naturally have. Behind the applause, a quiet ache followed him everywhere. Hollywood, however, didn't slow down. Not for fear, not for pain, not for children. Casting agents lined up, studios called, and Corey, barely old enough to drive, was suddenly balancing roles, interviews, and responsibilities that would overwhelm even a seasoned adult. Yet he carried it all with a youthful bravery, the kind that made fans adore him and directors trust him. Then came the role that would define his early career, Lucas. For many kids, a title role would be the ultimate dream, but for Corey, it was a turning point, an invitation into a world brighter than he'd ever known and darker than he could have imagined. Years later, chilling whispers about what happened behind the scenes would stain the film's legacy and reshuffle the narrative of Corey's life. But in that moment, in 1986, none of the horror, none of the accusations, none of the heartbreak had surfaced yet. To the public, Corey Haim was a rising comet, glowing brighter with every project. To Corey, he was just trying to keep up, trying not to drown in expectations heavier than his young shoulders could bear. He was winning awards, landing lead roles, moving from Canada to Los Angeles. On the outside, everything looked perfect. On the inside, the foundation was beginning to crack. And soon, Hollywood would stop being a dream and turn into the labyrinth that would change him forever. Lucas, a breakout role overshadowed by dark whispers. When Lucas hit theaters in 1986, Corey Haim seemed unstoppable. He wasn't just starring in a movie, he was the movie. His portrayal of the awkward, earnest outcast instantly won over audiences and critics alike. It was the kind of role that announces a young actor to the world, the kind that cements a legacy. For Corey, it should have been a triumph without shadows. But Hollywood has a way of turning victories into wounds. Years later, Corey Feldman, his closest friend and fellow ADS icon, revealed that something sinister may have happened behind the scenes of Lucas. According to Feldman, Corey had confided that he was molested during the shoot, and the allegation pointed toward one of Hollywood's most famous bad boys, Charlie Sheen. The story ignited like gasoline. Sheen denied everything. Corey's sister Carrie even defended him publicly, insisting the actor had been with her, not anywhere near her younger brother. For a moment, the accusations faded into the noise of Hollywood controversy. But the silence didn't last. In 2017, long after Corey's death, another figure stepped forward, actor Dominic Brascia, claiming Corey had told him the same story years earlier. Suddenly, the past refused to stay buried. Then came the most jarring twist of all. Corey's mother, Judy, stated firmly that no such incident could have happened because she had been on set every day, and she accused Brascia, not Sheen, of being the real abuser. The truth, tangled in conflicting voices and fading memories, remains lost in the shadows. What is certain is this: during a time when Corey's star was rising faster than ever, something dark was growing beneath the surface. Hidden trauma, whether from this incident or others never fully revealed, began carving scars that fame couldn't cover. And as Corey's world expanded, moving him from Canada to Los Angeles and into the heart of Hollywood's bright chaos, those early wounds followed him, quietly shaping the course of everything still to come. The Lost Boys, brotherhood, fame, and the shadows behind the spotlight. When Corey Haim moved to Los Angeles, Hollywood felt like a brand new universe, louder, brighter, faster than anything he'd ever known. And it was there, in the electrifying chaos of auditions and back-to-back scripts, that fate placed him on the set of The Lost Boys. The film would go on to become a cult classic, a defining piece of 80s cinema. But for Corey, its greatest impact came in the form of another young actor with the same first name, Corey Feldman. The two boys quickly bonded. While older castmates spent their nights partying, the Coreys, just teenagers, spent their downtime watching movies, cracking jokes, inventing a world of their own. Their friendship felt effortless, pure, and in a business famous for its fleeting relationships, almost miraculous. Soon, Hollywood and the media crowned them the two Coreys, turning their connection into a brand, a phenomenon, and a promise of a shared future. Together, they were unstoppable. Together, they were untouchable, or so it seemed. Behind the scenes, life was more complicated. The whirlwind of attention that came with the Lost Boys was intoxicating but demanding. The boys were suddenly icons, teen heartthrobs with posters covering bedroom walls across America. Yet they were still children, learning, stumbling, trying to stay afloat in an industry that never slowed down long enough to let them catch their breath. Their friendship grew stronger, but so did the pressures surrounding them. Fame had a way of amplifying everything, every joy, every mistake, every secret. And while the Coreys were riding the highest wave of their young careers, subtle cracks were forming beneath the surface. Shadows from their personal lives, unspoken struggles, and the darker corners of Hollywood began quietly closing in. Still, none of that showed on screen. In The Lost Boys, they were fearless, rebellious, larger than life. The truth was far more fragile. What the world saw was the rise of cinema's most iconic duo of the 1980s. What the world didn't see was that this brilliant partnership, the laughter, the late-night movies, the shared dreams, would also become the foundation for some of the most painful chapters still waiting ahead. Cracks beneath the spotlight, humor, pressure, and the first signs of trouble. After The Lost Boys cemented the Coreys as Hollywood's favorite duo, lightning struck twice. Their next film, License to Drive, was supposed to be another joyous leap forward, a fun teenage comedy with two rising stars at its center. And on the surface, that's exactly what it looked like. On set, the boys were energetic, playful, full of mischief in the way only teenagers can be. They made people laugh, pulled harmless pranks, and brought a spark to the production that everyone seemed to love. Director Greg Beeman remembered them as funny, spirited, and creatively alive. But even he admitted that sometimes they disappeared without warning, slipping out of sight with a weight behind their smiles that no one fully understood. Because behind the laughter, a much quieter story was unfolding, one that wasn't nearly as charming. Corey Haim, barely past childhood, was already feeling the pressure of fame pressing down on him. The demands, the expectations, the constant attention, everything that looked glamorous from the outside became overwhelming from within. And while filming License to Drive, faint but unmistakable signs began to emerge that Corey was struggling more deeply than anyone realized. His stress, his anxiety, his search for relief began to push him toward dangerous habits. Doctors attempting to help him manage his nerves prescribed medication meant to stabilize and soothe, but Corey, still so young and vulnerable, grew dependent on it in ways that would echo tragically throughout his career. The details remained painful and complex, but what mattered most was clear. He was beginning to lose control. Fans, once dazzled by his charisma, began noticing that something felt different. His once buoyant energy dulled. His performances, once effortless, appeared strained. Hollywood is a place that senses weakness quickly, and the industry, always moving, always hungry for the next young star, started to look past him. His film offers changed. His audience shifted. And slowly, quietly, Corey Haim began the descent that so many child actors face when the spotlight grows too heavy. During this period, Corey found one bright spot, a relationship with actress Nicole Eggert. She cared deeply for him, standing by him while he battled personal struggles few people his age could imagine. But their nights often dissolved into emergency room visits, desperate attempts to stabilize Corey through cycles of fear and exhaustion. What should have been a young Hollywood romance became a series of crises they were never prepared to handle. Eventually, their engagement, full of hope at the beginning, fell apart under the weight of circumstances neither of them could control. By the end of the decade, Corey Haim was still working, still smiling for cameras, still trying to hold on to the dream he'd chased since childhood. But beneath that dream, the ground was shifting. The pressures of fame, early trauma, and growing dependency were tightening around him. A mansion, a manager, and a descent behind closed doors. As Corey Haim tried to balance the chaos of young fame, he made a decision that seemed, at least from the outside, like a step toward stability. He bought a house. Not just any house, a beautiful mansion in Hancock Park, a symbol of success that most young actors only dreamed of. But the real twist wasn't the house itself, it was who he bought it with. Corey shared the property with his manager, Michael Bass, a man whose past included a conviction for financial misconduct. Most people would have seen that as a red flag, but Corey, craving trust and guidance, welcomed him in. It was a choice that would soon spiral into one of the most turbulent chapters of his life. Almost immediately, strange things began happening. Bass allegedly rushed the purchase so the mansion could host a charity event meant to benefit children. On paper, it sounded noble. In reality, whispers swirled that the entire event wasn't what it seemed. For Corey, who genuinely cared about helping others, the possibility of being used was a painful blow, even if he couldn't yet see the full picture. But tensions escalated quickly. What should have been a sanctuary turned into a battleground of broken promises, heated arguments, and growing mistrust. Corey eventually tried to fire Bass, but Bass refused to leave the house. The situation deteriorated to the point where an argument ignited into a chaotic confrontation, leading Corey, young, overwhelmed, and emotionally frayed, to make decisions out of fear and desperation. The result was a brief arrest, a moment that shocked fans and left Corey devastated. And when he found himself behind bars, unsure of what came next, it wasn't a lawyer or studio executive who came to help him, it was Corey Feldman. His best friend paid the small but symbolic bail, pulling him out of a situation that had spiraled far beyond control. Not long after, another unexpected figure entered the story: Michael Jackson. Following Feldman's public support during a highly scrutinized legal battle, Jackson invited both Coreys to visit his famed Neverland Ranch. The invite was framed as a thank you, a gesture of appreciation. For Corey Haim, it was a surreal moment, an escape, however brief, from the turmoil at home. But moments of peace never lasted long in Corey's world. The mansion, the manager, the arrest, each event carved deeper cracks into the life of a young actor already struggling to steer his own journey. And while he tried to keep moving, trying to trust the people around him, the truth was undeniable: Corey Haim was drifting toward a storm he wasn't prepared to face. Hollywood's harsh turn, rejection, collapse, and a friendship tested. By the mid-90s, Corey Haim was fighting to reclaim the momentum that had once come so easily. After years of being one of Hollywood's brightest young stars, his career had begun to flicker. He auditioned for the role of Robin in Joel Schumacher's Batman Forever, a chance to reignite everything, a chance to be seen again. Having worked with Schumacher on The Lost Boys, Corey hoped that history, talent, and his familiar charm would carry him through. But Hollywood is rarely sentimental. The part went to Chris O'Donnell, and the rejection hit Corey harder than he let anyone know. In an effort to stay active and rebuild, he agreed to star in Corey Feldman's directorial debut, Busted. It should have been a celebration, a reunion of two friends who had once ruled the decade together. But the stress, the pressure, and Corey's ongoing personal battles made the production anything but smooth. Feldman, taking his role as director seriously, tried to maintain order on set, but Corey was struggling. His absences became frequent, his focus inconsistent. He arrived some days unable to work, other days overwhelmed by the weight he carried. Feldman tried to help as a friend, but as a director, he was forced to face a painful truth. He couldn't complete the film with Corey in that state. And so, in a moment that neither of them would forget, Corey Feldman made the heartbreaking decision to let his best friend go. It wasn't anger, it was sorrow. The two Coreys, inseparable for so long, suddenly found themselves divided by circumstances neither boy had ever imagined when they first bonded over movies and late-night laughter. The troubles didn't stop there. While preparing for another film, Paradise Bar, Corey hesitated on an insurance form asking about medical conditions. Hoping to keep working, he checked the wrong box, or didn't check one he needed to. When the producers eventually discovered inconsistencies, they involved their insurer, leading to a lawsuit that cost Corey hundreds of thousands of dollars. Debt piled up. Work slowed. The industry, once eager to place him at the center of its stories, now looked at him with hesitation. And Corey, still young, still hopeful despite the odds, found himself slipping further from the spotlight he had never asked for, but had grown up inside. Through it all, there was a quiet, aching truth. Corey Haim wanted to rise again. He wanted to find the magic he once brought so effortlessly to the screen. But Hollywood's door was closing, and every time he reached for the handle, it seemed to pull farther away, and the darkest chapters of his journey were still ahead. Bankruptcy and a return to nowhere. By 1997, the arc of Corey Haim's life had bent painfully far from the promise of his early fame. The world that once adored him now felt distant, blurred by lawsuits, unpaid taxes, and a growing mountain of debt that no young actor could outrun. Filing for bankruptcy wasn't just paperwork. It was a symbol of how drastically his reality had collapsed. Once a teen sensation, Corey now listed barely more than a few belongings and a fraction of what remained of his pride. With Hollywood doors closing around him, Corey retreated to Canada, hoping that distance might steady him. His next film, Without Malice, took him deep into the quiet prairie of Saskatchewan, a place so small it had only one bar, where Corey became a familiar face every night. On set, his anxiety leaked through. He paused filming repeatedly just to call home and confirm that his dog was still alive. To those watching, it was clear how fragile he had become. As the years wore on, the decline grew harder to mask. In 2001, True Hollywood Story documented Corey's life with an unflinching lens. A once famous actor now sharing a modest apartment with his mother in Santa Monica, scraping by, pawning personal items, at times asking for just a few dollars to buy food. For fans who remembered the boy from Lucas, it was heartbreaking. Yet even in these bleak moments, there were small flashes of who Corey had once been, his humor, his warmth, his attempt to keep going despite everything. He wasn't ready to give up. even if the world seemed ready to forget him. But the climb back to stability would be steeper than he ever imagined. And the story of Corey Haim was nowhere near its final chapter. Hollywood's forgotten star tries to rise again. By the early 2000s, Corey Haim's once dazzling stardom felt like a distant memory. Yet Hollywood hadn't fully forgotten him. In 2003, he appeared in Dickie Roberts, Former Child Star, a comedy packed with real-life former child actors. It wasn't a comeback, but it was a paycheck, and a reminder that audiences still felt a strange, nostalgic affection for the boy who once stole their hearts. That lingering spark inspired a bold idea, a reality show. If people still cared about the two Coreys, maybe telling their story could reignite something. And so, The Two Coreys was born, a show where Haim moved in with Corey Feldman and his wife, cameras capturing their attempt to reconnect and rebuild. But the world wasn't prepared for what it saw. The once vibrant teen idol now appeared older than his years, his face marked by years of struggle. The audience, expecting lighthearted nostalgia, instead witnessed raw tension, emotional conversations, and buried wounds resurfacing. And then came the moment no one expected. Corey speaking openly about a painful experience from his youth, revealing that someone from their orbit had betrayed his trust when he was a teenager. It was a revelation that shook the show, the friendship, and fans watching at home. After that episode, the bond between the two Coreys faltered, and the show briefly halted. Even winning a Canadian Gemini Award couldn't repair Corey Haim's finances or mend the fractures inside him. Desperate to survive, Corey tried unconventional ways to earn money, selling memorabilia, even listing odd items online just to stay afloat. It was heartbreaking, surreal, and painfully clear. This was a young man fighting to hold on in a world that kept slipping through his fingers. Yet despite everything, despite the strain, the headlines, the ghosts of his past, Corey still believed he could reclaim a piece of his old life. He wasn't done dreaming. Not yet. The Lost Boys return without one of its originals. For Corey Haim, The Lost Boys wasn't just another movie. It was the crown jewel of his teenage fame, the film that bonded him with Corey Feldman and immortalized them in pop culture history. So when word spread that a sequel was finally happening, Corey felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. Surely if anyone deserved a place in the sequel, it was him. Surely after everything he'd endured, Hollywood might open one small door. But when Corey reached out to the producers, expecting scheduling details, he was met with a devastating surprise. There was no role for him. Not a starring part, not a supporting part, nothing. All they could offer was a brief cameo. It was a blow that cut deeper than rejection. It felt like erasure. Still, Corey, trying to stay optimistic, showed up to film the cameo, hoping this tiny appearance could be the start of something better. Instead, life handed him another painful twist. Arriving on set in poor condition, he was quietly sent home. No scene, no cameo, no comeback. For many, that moment would have been the end. For Corey Haim, strangely, it became a turning point. Something in him snapped awake. The humiliation, the disappointment, the realization that the industry he'd grown up in no longer recognized him. It pushed him to try again, to rebuild from the ground up. Almost against all odds, Corey began working regularly. Shark City, Crank, High Voltage, American Sunset, Decisions. He insisted on clean sets, clear boundaries, healthy routines. And for a brief moment, it worked. The spark returned, the discipline, the charm, the flashes of the old Corey the world once loved. It wasn't a full comeback, but it was movement. It was hope. And for the first time in a long time, Corey Haim looked like he might finally be steering his life back toward the light. The final days and the echo that refused to fade. By early 2010, Corey Haim seemed closer than ever to reclaiming the future he once thought he'd lost. He was acting again, showing up with discipline, asking for clean sets and healthy boundaries. For the first time in years, there was a sense, however fragile, that he was finding his way back. The roles weren't huge, but they were steady. They were hopeful. They were his. And then, as it had so many times before, life took a sharp and merciless turn. Corey came down with what looked like an ordinary flu. Nothing alarming, just fatigue, fever, and the ache of a body worn down by years of stress. A doctor examined him at home and reassured him that he simply needed rest. But in the days that followed, Corey grew weaker. One morning, trying to rise from bed, he collapsed. His mother rushed to his side, finding him unresponsive, and called for help. In the early hours of March 10, 2010, Corey Haim passed away at just 38 years old. Hollywood mourned a fallen star. Fans mourned the boy who had once been the heartbeat of an entire generation. Official reports pointed to pneumonia and serious underlying health complications, closing a life marked by both brilliance and profound struggle. Even in death, Corey faced the hardships that had shadowed him in life. His mother lacked the means to give him a proper farewell, but help came, first from the city of Toronto, then from a memorabilia company, and finally from the funeral home itself. Piece by piece, those who still cared made sure Corey was laid to rest with dignity. But his story didn't end there. A decade later, Corey Feldman released a documentary revisiting the lives of the two Coreys, stirring old questions, unresolved concerns, and allegations that cast long, dark shadows over the boys' past. Discussion reignited. Debates grew louder. Hollywood's silence felt heavier. And as conflicting voices emerged, friends, family, producers, defenders, and critics, one truth rose above the noise. Corey Haim's life had been shaped not just by fame, but by the unseen forces behind it. In the year Corey passed away, the Academy Awards in Memoriam segment omitted his name. It was a moment that stung deeply for fans, a symbol of how easily Hollywood could forget the child stars it once celebrated. But outside those walls, people remembered. They still do. Because Corey Haim wasn't just a fallen teen icon. He was a reminder of the cost of early fame, of pressures no child should bear, of a bright spirit dimmed too early. His story became a cautionary tale, a mystery, a heartbreak, and above all, a legacy that refuses to disappear. Corey's light may have faded, but the echoes of his life continue to haunt Hollywood's quietest corners.